Oh, what a Savior. Oh, what a Savior. These brief words of meditation as we wrap up this service. Remember the third song in the cantata? Love came calling. When I was straying in sin, when I had no hope, when my heart was broken, when I was in a storm, when I was dealing with bitter pain, when I was in tears, what happened? Love came calling. A love that shows up. We're familiar with the story of the cross and the tomb and the death and the burial and Sunday morning and the empty tomb. But we forget about sometimes what came next. Love came calling. If you piece together all the New Testament accounts of the resurrection and post-resurrection, you discover that Jesus appeared 10 times in a 40-day period. Between Easter morning and the afternoon he ascended into heaven. Only 10 recorded times. And what's fascinating is that all of those 10 appearances were to his friends and close followers. He appeared to Mary Magdalene, to the women returning from the tomb, to Peter, to the 2 broken-hearted Christians on the road to Emmaus, the disciples without Thomas, the disciples with Thomas, on the seashore to 7 fishermen disciples, to 500 people, to James, his half-brother, at his ascension to a handful of his followers. Now, if I were God, and if I were writing the script of how Jesus would appear, I think I would have done things a little differently. I'd have had Jesus appear to some different groups of people. Why not have him appear to the unbelieving crowd who cried, "Crucify him"? Or why not to the skeptical religious leaders who never believed him? Or why not to those who had accused him falsely and ridiculed him and eventually condemned him to die as a blasphemer and criminal? Or why not to Pilate or Herod or Caiaphas the high priest, all who took the crowd more seriously than him? You get the picture? There's something in me that would want to vindicate myself if I was Jesus and prove the skeptics and non-believers all wrong. Wouldn't it be great to have had Jesus suddenly be standing before those unbelievers and skeptics with his hands outstretched saying, "Look, see the marks? I told you I was the Son of God. I told you I'd rise again. I was right. You were wrong. Nah. And just get in their face and shame them publicly. I mean, his friends and his close followers already knew and believed who he was. It makes sense to me to have these 10 appearances be to those who needed to be convinced and set straight. But that was not how God chose to reveal himself. He came to people like you and me, his closest friends and followers. So I asked why? Why only to us? Now, I don't know God's thinking exactly, but when you study these 10 appearances a little, here's what you find. Jesus comes quickest to those who need him the most. Did you get that? Jesus shows up when we need him the most, and when he does, we are never the same. You see, these 10 appearances of Jesus were to those who had given up the better part of 3 years of their lives to follow him. They were the ones who'd known and loved him and would have been most affected by his death and would grieve most. Something died inside of all of them when that dead, limp, lifeless body came off the cross. Every hope and every dream they'd had for the future was buried with him. Saturday and Sunday, the disciples had locked themselves away, hidden, confused, distraught, afraid, and very guilty. And all of a sudden, God's way seems to make sense. Jesus appeared to the ones who needed him the most. Furthermore, they were the ones Jesus was leaving behind to continue his work. He was heading back to heaven, mission accomplished for him, but there was a whole world still to reach. And in order for his followers to have the zeal and enthusiasm and courage to spread the message of Easter, they needed the joy of seeing him alive. They needed to have their shattered hopes and dreams restored. You see, God, as he always does, knew what he's doing. These appearances tell us that Jesus comes quickest to those who need him the most. And if you don't think you need him or don't think you want him, he'll never force himself on you. Do you know something else? As you read the record of these 10 appearances, there were radical changes in the lives of those to whom he appeared. In every case, sadness turned to joy. Tears were turned into laughter. Weeping became singing. Worry became worship. Fear melted into courage. Despair into hope. Mental fatigue was replaced with enthusiasm and energy. Feelings of sorrow and guilt became feelings of relief and forgiveness and peace. And you know, friends, that's an Easter message we all need to hear this morning at the end of this service. Because life is a way of doing that to you, what it did to Jesus' followers, grinding you down with its pressures and stresses, taking your joy and twisting it into sadness, taking your hopes and dreams and dashing them on the rocks of disappointment and discouragement, replacing your strength with fatigue, sapping your enthusiasm, turning your courage into fear. Jesus comes quickest to those who need him the most, those who are open to him, those who are dependent on him. And when he does, nothing ever stays the same. Jesus' transforming presence, healing received, perspective restored, hope renewed. And Jesus comes quickest to those who need him the most. And when he does, nothing ever stays the same. Because he lives. Do you remember the song? We sang it earlier this morning. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know who holds the future. Just because he lives. Friends, Jesus this morning can make you a new person. He did it for Mary. He did it for Peter. He did it for John and the rest of the boys. And if he did it for them, he can do it for you. Love came calling. A love that shows up.